Hey everybody, Nathan Brown here with FC Piero, and welcome to our Volkswagen Atlas and Atlas Cross Sport Buyer's Guide. Today we're going to be covering everything from the introduction of the Atlas in 2018 all the way up to the current model year. That includes things such as the interior and exterior features on the vehicle, the infotainment systems, engine, transmission, driveline options, and much more. As a reminder, we do have much more in-depth technical guides available on our channel that's going to deep dive into the engine, transmission, drivelines, and braking and suspension systems of these vehicles. So if you're interested in more technical information, please go check those out. But of course, stay through this video to learn more about these vehicles and the general features that they have. So before we get too far into it, we're going to talk about the Atlas and what made it different from any other Volkswagen vehicle that was really on the market in the USA before it. Up until 2018, Volkswagen had the Tiguan SUV, which was really an entry-level sort of like SUV compact, almost a CUV, based on the passenger platform. And it was very popular, it sold very well, but it's not really a solution for your average American family, let's say. So the concept of the Atlas was, let's make a proper mid-size SUV to compete with a lot of the other players on the market that's going to be appealing to the American buyer. The Volkswagen Atlas is fully manufactured inside the United States in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and is actually manufactured here and exported globally to other markets, much like some of the other SUVs from BMW and other German and European manufacturers. The Atlas itself is built on what's called the MQB platform. That is Volkswagen's modular transverse matrix platform. What that actually means is that Volkswagen essentially has a certain manufacturing process in place that allows them to quickly scale a vehicle's size one way or the other, still use a lot of the similar components and manufacturing techniques, but actually make a much larger or smaller vehicle, right? So the MQB platform is used on the GTI, it's used on the Jetta, it's used on the Golf R, it's used on the Tiguan, and now with the Atlas, it was now blown up into SUV proportions. While you may be thinking that you don't necessarily want to purchase a big SUV or truck that's based on a passenger platform, at this point in time, it's actually a fairly common process, and a lot of other manufacturers do this. So don't let that kind of hang you up that it's based on a passenger car platform or a engineering platform, let's say, and focus more on the fact of what it truly is and what it truly has, which is an outrageous amount of interior space, decent towing capacity if it's equipped with the towing package, lots of technology, lots of convenience, lots of functions, and will really sort of rival a lot of its competitors on the market. Now, the Volkswagen Atlas was a hit pretty much right away, and it sold very well right from its introduction in 2018. Up to the current time period, which is late 2024 as we're shooting this video, around 480,000 plus Volkswagen Atlases have been sold inside the United States. The Atlas Cross Sport, which was introduced in 2020, has not sold quite as well, but it also hasn't been on sale quite as long. There's over 150,000 of those on the road today. So if you're looking for an Atlas on the used market, something to purchase, there should be a plethora available depending on what you're looking for and what your needs are, and of course, what your budget is. The Atlas is Volkswagen's fighter in the mid-size SUV market. So the competition for Volkswagen in the mid-size SUV market includes the Honda Pilot, Kia Telluride, Hyundai Palisade, Jeep Grand Cherokee, and the Mazda CX-90, among others. What of course sets it apart is the unique styling, the German sort of function of the Volkswagen, which really helps it stand out on the market and on the highway and the road compared to those more traditional, let's say, SUVs available. So if you're looking for a used Atlas or Atlas Cross Sport, there's essentially 3 variations of the Atlas and 2 variations of the Cross Sport that you're going to see in terms of how they look on the outside. The first version is going to be the Atlas introduction model, which was sold in 2018 until 2020. Then the Atlas Cross Sport was introduced in 2020 with a new look, both front and rear. That updated front end and LED taillights was introduced onto the Atlas in 2021, and both of those models carried through until 2023 with that same look, front and rear. In 2024, both models were facelifted, and that look carries on today into 2025. That's going to include a much more sort of dynamic or refined looking front end, LED light strip options across both the front grille and the rear heck blend, and illuminated badging as well. A lot of that's designed to sort of align with some of Volkswagen's electrification vehicles and things where they have a much more sort of visual presence on the outside. If you see one of those models on the highway, you absolutely know what it is, which is always kind of a cool thing. So one of the more impressive features of the Volkswagen Atlas is its absolutely massive interior space. Although it's labeled as a mid-sized SUV, it can rival the interior space of much, much larger vehicles that you might find on the road. It has seating for up to 7 full-size adults with the optional third row. It has over 153 cubic feet of total interior space and plenty of headroom and legroom for all the passengers regardless of where they're sitting in the car. The standard second row seating in the Volkswagen Atlas features a 60-40 split, individual sliding range of 7.7 inches front to rear on either side, an adjustable backrest, and has the ability to flip forward and allow third row seating access even with child seats in place. That means there's a lot of flexibility for a family, especially if you have multiple small children and are using all 3 rows to get to school, get to the sports practice, or whatever else you may be doing. So the overall interior features and functions of the Atlas and Atlas CrossSport remained more or less the same, aside from some small updates throughout the years all the way up until 2024. In 2024, there was a more major update that did include some aspects of the infotainment system, but more importantly for a lot of buyers, the 2024 models have an increased focus on the quality, on the touch and feel of the interior components. This helps to address one of the major complaints from some reviewers of the Atlas and Atlas CrossSport, which stated that the older versions felt a little cheaper than they should compared to some of the competition, or certainly perhaps a little less Volkswagen than a Volkswagen should be. We'll get a little bit more in depth in some of those interior features and functions later on in the video, but for now, let's get under the hood and we'll talk about the engines and transmissions and drivelines of the Volkswagen Atlas. So what's under the hood? Depending on the year and the exact trim line of the Volkswagen Atlas or Atlas CrossSport that you're looking at, there could be a couple different engines and a couple different options when it comes to the actual driveline of the vehicle. One of the more popular engines and the most common ones that you're going to find is going to be the 3.6 liter VR6. This is a naturally aspirated, narrow angle V6 that produces 276 horsepower and 266 foot-pounds of torque. The VR6 engine has been used in the Atlas, as well as numerous Volkswagen and even some Audi and Porsche vehicles over the years, and is generally regarded as being a reliable and robust engine. There's not a whole lot of major things that go wrong with it, provided it's had all of its normal service and care, and it is available in both front-wheel drive and the 4Motion all-wheel drive options. Typically, I would always recommend to go with the 4Motion option when available. In front-wheel drive, it's a lot of torque and it can be a little bit twitchy to drive on the road and in fact spin up the front wheels quite easily in inclement weather and when it's wet and things like that. So the 4Motion option is always going to be the preferred option when it comes to the VR6 engine in particular. So one of the major benefits of the VR6 is that it is the only version of the Atlas or Atlas CrossSport that was available with the full 5,000 pounds towing capacity up until the 2024 model year. So if you're looking at an Atlas, you're planning on towing something, whether it be a small boat, utility trailer, or even a small car trailer, an Atlas with the VR6, 4Motion, and the factory towing package is what you're going to want. That will allow that 5,000 pound towing capacity. If you have the VR6, even with 4Motion, and it wasn't equipped with that factory towing package, technically the towing capacity is only 2,000 pounds, which is a significant reduction, obviously, from that full 5,000 pound capacity rating. If there are any dings against the VR6, it's that ultimately it's not going to be the most fuel efficient engine available in the Atlas. But of course, if you're buying one of these vehicles, it's probably not going to be for its ultimate fuel efficiency. It's a big vehicle, it's going to use some fuel to get it around, but it's still going to be significantly better than a lot of the competitors. On the front-wheel drive 3.6 VR6, the Volkswagen Atlas gets 18 miles per gallon city, 25 miles per gallon highway, 20 miles per gallon combined. In 4Motion variation, you do lose a little bit of efficiency. On the 4Motion VR6, the Atlas gets 17 miles per gallon city, 23 miles per gallon highway, and a total of 19 miles per gallon combined. Ultimately not too bad compared to some competition, but you will expect to go through some fuel in around town driving. Introduced alongside the VR6 in 2018 is the E8888 Gen 3 TSI 2-liter turbocharged engine from Volkswagen. This is used all across the Volkswagen model line, and it's very similar to other engines used on the GTI, the Jetta, the Passat, and other Volkswagen vehicles. The Gen 3 TSI used in the Volkswagen Atlas makes 235 horsepower and 258 pounds-feet of torque, which is a pretty significant reduction in horsepower from the VR6 and only a modest reduction in torque. Now, this does get you slightly better fuel efficiency. It does have some drawbacks. One of the primary ones is that you could not option the 2-liter engine with the 4Motion all-wheel drive system until 2021, which means that basically you can't get the towing package on any of these vehicles, and you don't really get the additional assurance that the 4Motion all-wheel drive gives you. So if you're looking for a used market Atlas, I would highly recommend looking for a very late model 2-liter version if you are going for one of the turbocharged versions instead of the naturally aspirated VR6. Now, because you can't option the towing package on the 2-liter turbocharged Atlas until 2024, pretty much all of those are going to be limited to that 2,000-pound towing capacity. So again, if you're looking to purchase an Atlas or an Atlas Cross Sport with the ability to tow a decent-sized trailer, like a vehicle or a boat or what have you, you absolutely want to make sure you either get the most modern version 2-liter or you, again, go for that VR6. So as I mentioned, you do get slightly better fuel efficiency with the 2-liter turbocharged engine on the Atlas. That goes to 21 miles per gallon city, 25 miles per gallon highway, and a total of 23 miles per gallon combined on the front-wheel drive 2-liter Atlas. So starting in 2021, once you could option that 4Motion system, the fuel mileage does reduce slightly. That goes down to 20 miles per gallon city, 24 miles per gallon highway, and ultimately 22 miles per gallon combined on, again, the 2-liter turbocharged 4Motion Atlas. So much to the chagrin of many Volkswagen enthusiasts across the world, certainly the ones inside the USA, the VR6 engine was discontinued in 2023, which means you can no longer get the classic Wookiee noise as many people call it, from the tailpipe or under the hood of the Volkswagen Atlas or Atlas Cross Sport. So the primary reason for this was ultimately emissions compliance. It has to do with the weight of the vehicle and a bunch of other factors, but the long story short is the VR6 is no longer available. Having dropped the VR6, in 2024, Volkswagen went to the Evo 4 EA888 engine. This is the most up-to-date version of the 2.0 turbocharged engine from Volkswagen and produces 269 horsepower and 273 pounds-feet of torque. That's almost as much horsepower as the VR6 and even more torque. So it's actually quite a nice model, and it's quite a nice option if you're looking to maximize the performance of the Atlas that you have. So before we move on to the transmission and the drive lines on the Atlas and Atlas Cross Sport, I want to touch on engine maintenance a little bit. Now, one of the things that Volkswagen specifies on any of these engines is a 10,000 mile oil change interval, or every 1 year. Ultimately, that is going to be, in my opinion, a little bit too long for maximum engine life. Typically, reducing that to about a 5,000 mile oil change interval with an approved Volkswagen spec oil that's right for your particular Atlas, which you will find a sticker under the hood that tells you what oil to use. If you're using that oil, if you're changing it every 5,000 miles, you're going to see much improved life of the internal engine components on either the VR6 or the 2-liter turbocharged option. The primary reason for this, of course, is a reduction in wear on the bearing surfaces and the cylinder walls of the engines themselves, but all of these engines feature very, very tight tolerances on a variety of oil-fed components, including timing chain tensioners, cam adjusters, and things like that. Failing to change the oil on a regular basis will result in sludge and buildup, and ultimately a lack of ideal operation in those components, and of course, increased wear. So if you plan on keeping your Atlas or Atlas Cross Sport for a long time, and you want to make sure you want to minimize, extensive engine repairs in the future, moving to a 5,000 mile oil change is highly recommended no matter what. Outside of engine oil changes, you essentially have your normal sort of services to focus on. That's going to include, checking and replacing your engine air filter. Volkswagen has a very long 6-year, 60,000 mile interval on that. I would generally recommend checking every year to 2 years, depending on how you drive, and replacing it about every 20,000 miles, maybe 30,000 miles, again, depending on how you drive the car and where you're driving it. Likewise, when it comes to the spark plugs and services there, the 2-liter turbocharged versions have a 40,000 mile service interval, and the VR6 has a 60,000 mile interval. That's generally pretty accurate and good to stick to that unless you're really doing a lot of heavy driving or towing, or perhaps if you've tuned the vehicle for higher performance. Now, as I mentioned previously in the video, we do have a much more in-depth engine diagnostic video available, which you can also find on our channel, where I go much more in-depth on some of the other service considerations on all of these engines. So now that we've talked engines, let's talk transmissions. There's really only one to talk about under the hood of the Atlas or the Atlas Cross Sport. Regardless of whether it is front-wheel drive, four-wheel drive 4Motion, or 2-liter turbocharged engine, or the VR6, they all feature the same Aisin AWF 8F 3545 8-speed transmission. Ultimately, this transmission has proved to be quite reliable and is used across a variety of makes and models and not just found under the hood of the Atlas. There have been no major changes to the transmission itself over the years. The very, very early Atlas models, sold from 2018 up to 2020, did feature an unwanted noise basically from the torque converter that was solved by putting a few rubber plugs into the bell housing of that unit. And later models do feature slightly refined programming for a smoother driving experience. This is especially pronounced again on the 2024 models, where it is said that Volkswagen put a lot of additional time into programming these transmissions to have a more refined sort of feel over the road. Ultimately, however, it is the exact same transmission, and they've, as I mentioned, proved to be quite good. The Volkswagen service interval on these in terms of replacing the fluid and filter is 80,000 miles. We typically would recommend something more in the 50 to 60,000 mile range, and we do have a full service kit available on the website to take care of that. So as I mentioned, a reduced 50 to 60,000 mile service interval is going to be good for any Atlas or Atlas Cross Sport. If you happen to do an extraordinary amount of towing or really, really heavy hauling or use, you could reduce it a little bit further, but ultimately that's going to extend the life of that transmission and its components significantly and should see you through for many, many years of reliable service. Now, when it comes to the drive lines here, we're really just talking front-wheel drive or 4Motion all-wheel drive. The front-wheel drive unit is just a standard front-wheel drive transmission. It only has 2 CV axles going out to the wheel hubs, and there's not a lot to service on this. There's only a couple of components that could potentially wear out, and again, there's not a lot to talk about. On the 4Motion, however, you do have some additional items to service based on that all-wheel drive system. The primary thing is going to be the 4Motion system. This is a Haldex Generation 5 all-wheel drive, and it is an active system. What it basically means is that it is constantly monitoring the front wheels for slippage. Once the ECU and the control unit for their all-wheel drive system have talked to each other and they've determined, hey, I've got wheel slip at the front, it begins to lock up and activate the rear all-wheel drive system. Now, as I mentioned, the front-wheel drive versions of the Atlas can be a little bit challenged for traction in certain types of situations. That means that the 4Motion versions are much, much better, but it also means that the 4Motion unit is working quite hard to keep everything under control and to keep that Atlas moving forward. Volkswagen does not necessarily have a specified mileage for service on this for replacing the fluid. It does, however, have a time limit of 3 years. Generally speaking, we would say absolutely no more than 40,000 miles on a fluid service on one of these vehicles. And again, if you go off-road, if you drive a lot in the snow, or if you're towing or heavy hauling with your Atlas or Atlas Cross Sport, I would definitely say to reduce that down to about a 30,000 mile service interval. Now, that may not seem like very much, but the fluid is fairly inexpensive, it's fairly easy to replace, and there's not a whole lot of it in the system. The reason why you want to keep it fresh is that there is no additional filtration system other than a small metal screen on the pump that actually activates the all-wheel drive system. So when you're doing the service, you want to make sure you keep that screen clean. If, however, it's not serviced regularly enough, if the fluid starts to build up with clutch material, dirt, and debris, it can damage that Haldex pump. Now, thankfully, the cost of replacing one of those has gone down significantly. They used to be quite expensive. They're now just a few $100s. And again, as I mentioned, they're easy to replace, but it's fairly cheap insurance to stay up on the service and make sure that the all-wheel drive system continues to function properly. Outside of the all-wheel drive system itself, you do have a front and a rear differential that are going to need fluid replacement every 50 or 60,000 miles or so. It's fairly straightforward, fairly inexpensive, and fairly easy to do. So we've talked about the origins of the Atlas. We've gone over a bit of the exterior, we've gone over a bit of the interior, we've gone in depth on the engines, the transmission, and the driveline options on the Atlas and the Atlas Cross Sport. So now it's time to talk the various trim levels and models that exist across all the years of the Atlas and the Atlas Cross Sport. Ultimately, there are quite a lot. There's almost too many to get into in this buyer's guide. So what we're going to do, rather than go line by line for the S, the SE, the SE with technology, the SEL, etc., Rather than going model by model, line by line, year by year, we'd be here for an hour and a half. I'm going to basically talk through some of the more common desirable features that may exist in certain packages, and then as you're looking for a vehicle to purchase, you can say, hey, I know that I want the R-Line, I know that I want the Fender Premium Audio, and you can kind of look for one that has those features more than saying you definitely need an SEL Premium R-Line in the model year 2021 in order to have X, Y, and Z. One thing that I can say for sure is that if there is a feature that is only available as a premium model, like an SEL Premium or something like that, and an early generation Atlas, that's probably going to become standard at some point over the years in a lower model Atlas. Typically, an SE with technology pack is going to be the lowest model you should probably be looking at in terms of purchasing, in terms of what you can actually get. However, there's plenty of options out there, and there's a shoe for every foot, and there's an Atlas for every buyer probably. So let's talk exterior options for the Atlas and Atlas Cross Sport. Every single Atlas from the introduction has full LED lighting on the front end, including high beams, low beams, turn signals, and side markers across the board. There's no difference whatsoever in terms of the lighting output of the lower end models versus the higher end models. The earliest Atlases only featured LED taillights on the SEL Premium models, and those became standard in 2021 when it was updated to match the Atlas Cross Sport. The Atlas Cross Sport has featured full LED lighting front and rear for the entirety of its model run, and all of that was updated on both the Atlas and Atlas Cross Sport in 2024 to be a much more immersive lighting package. There are a few variations here and there as they updated the lighting output of some of the low beam units on the premium models, but for the most part, it's not going to really impact your drivability or your driving experience. However, as mentioned earlier, the 2024 models do feature a much more robust sort of aesthetic lighting package that includes optional LED light bars on the front grille, the rear trim and heck blend as we would call it, and illuminated badges front and rear. One of the most desirable packages on an Atlas or an Atlas Cross Sport is definitely going to be the R-Line. The R-Line look is going to set this car apart from all the other versions on the highway. Usually is going to feature either black wheels or dark gray wheels, some kind of a wheel that would be different from the standard SEL, SE versions, etc. It's going to have an updated front and rear bumper. Usually it's going to be much more aggressive looking. It's going to have side skirts. Typically it's going to feature specific R-Line badging and a rear valance. All of these things kind of add up to a slightly more aggressive, slightly more sporty Atlas, and it's definitely one to look out for, in my opinion. Starting in 2024, Volkswagen introduced the Atlas Peak Edition. This is sort of an overlanding version of the R-Line package. Rather than black trim and accents, it typically features silver items, and it's sort of designed to look a little bit more rugged, a little bit more off-road. Definitely stands out from the crowd, but one of the nice things about the Atlas and the Atlas Cross Sport is that they're so easy to customize. If you purchase an older version or you purchase one that doesn't necessarily have that package, it's really easy to add those on with some of the aftermarket accessories available from companies like B2B Fabrication or even some factory Volkswagen driver gear accessories. The Atlas Peak Edition essentially drew inspiration from a Volkswagen accessories package called the Atlas Basecamp. This included a number of items such as fender flares, side skirts, different front valance, and some optional wheels and graphics. So if you want to recreate your own version of the Basecamp, it's quite easy to do so using those factory Volkswagen accessories. So when it comes to the exterior of the Atlas, there's really a couple other things to touch on, and they're mainly sitting up high. And that is going to be the sunroof and the roof rails. First, every Atlas features roof rails from the factory, which allows you to fit additional roof racks and roof accessories to the top of the vehicle, meaning it is quite versatile. You could build an overlanding unit, you can do snowboards, bike racks, anything like that, and the Atlas is pretty much equipped from the factory to add all of that on. A good number of the Atlas and Atlas Cross Sport vehicles that you find for sale are likely to have the panoramic sunroof option. This is a very, very large sunroof. It is over 4.5 feet long and nearly 2 3/4 feet wide. It does have a lot of great benefits in terms of letting in light and providing a very open air driving experience for such a large SUV. But it does have a couple of drawbacks, and that mainly comes down to sunroof leaks. Now, the sunroof itself does not tend to leak. The issue is that the sunroof drains will get backed up and clogged, and that will cause that water to leak into the cabin from the top. This is not really anything that can be addressed per se in terms of a fix by Volkswagen, other than making sure that you keep your sunroof drains clean and free of debris. This should be done about every year, and if you do so, you should have a very dry motoring experience when you're behind the wheel of your Atlas or Atlas Cross Sport. If you do happen to be looking at a used vehicle that has a very musty smell, something that would appear as though there might have had a significant amount of water in it at some point in time, you might want to do some investigation to, one, make sure that it is no longer clogged and no longer leaking, and two, that there's not any other extensive damage or things to worry about with regards to water that's been inside the car. Now it's time to talk the interior and infotainment options on the Atlas and the Atlas Cross Sport. And as I mentioned, this is kind of where it gets a little bit busy and a little bit hard to keep up. So I'm going to touch on the really important stuff and some things that you might want to look out for. First and foremost, there is the Fender audio system. It is a 480 watt 12 speaker system that's going to sound a lot better and provide a much better experience for you and your passengers when you're going down the road. There have been as many as 3 systems available throughout the years, depending on the exact year of the Volkswagen Atlas that you're looking at, but the Fender unit is going to be the best one to go for, and one that I personally, as I mentioned, would try to find. All Atlas models at minimum feature a dual zone climate control system. The premium versions will add in additional controls for the second row passengers, and the 3-row versions of the Atlas are going to have a 3-zone climate control system. This means that all of the passengers in the vehicle can be comfortable no matter their preference. This next function is sort of interior, sort of exterior, but I put it on the interior because it's really about gaining access to the inside that makes it worthwhile. And that is the power tailgate, sometimes with the easy open function. The power tailgate feature is, as you would imagine, an option to open the rear tailgate of the Atlas with your vehicle's remote control. If you add in the easy open option, that allows you to open the rear tailgate with a tap of the lower rear bumper with your foot. This means, of course, if your hands are full, if you've got some groceries or something along those lines, it's very easy to open that up without having to fumble for your keys or anything like that. One of the cooler features on the Atlas and the Atlas Cross Sport is the Volkswagen Digital Cockpit. This was originally only available on the SEL Premium, but slowly was cascaded throughout the different trim levels over the years and eventually made standard in 2024. The earliest versions feature a 12.3-inch digital screen. This is fully customizable to allow you to display almost any of the information in the vehicle on the gauge cluster in front of the driver. Over the years, it also got a little bit bigger and more fully featured and has improved illumination and other functions. Now, obviously, we haven't gone into every single trim level option and feature of every Atlas and Atlas Cross Sport, but hopefully this video has helped to give you an idea of the primary features and functions that are available if you're looking for one of these on the used market. So hopefully with our buyer's guide here today, you've learned a little bit more about the Atlas and Atlas Cross Sport and are more informed about the one that you would like to purchase. If you have any questions on things that we either didn't touch on, or maybe there's something that we forgot to talk about that you feel is very important, please be sure to leave it in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking, subscribing to the channel, where we have a lot of other videos just like this one. And with that, we'll see you on the next one.